welcome back to the podcast. We are so glad that you are joining us today, and we are going to talk about a very exciting and thrilling topic, stewarding the mundane in our lives.
That really sets us up for failure.
That's true. But if you think about it, this is something we all deal with literally on a daily basis. And I think for me, I think this topic kind of hits me this time of year. The holidays are over. You know, I've got all my New Year's goals and I'm going back to life. It's winter, so there's not much going on, at least not for me. And I'm just day in and day out doing the things that I need to do. And I think it's just a time, it's still dark outside, and like I said, the holidays are over. So you just kind of feel like there's a long stretch before anything exciting happens.
It's true.
For me being my birthday in April. And it's just like, you just kind of feel almost stuck sometimes, I think, stuck in a rut, and it can feel a little depressing. And so I think changing our perspective a bit on what it means to actually steward the mundane in our life could be really beneficial in this time of year.
Yeah, for sure. I already kind of felt myself starting to be like, okay, so what's next?
You got back from vacation yesterday.
That's what I'm saying. It's really fast. And I usually, once the year starts up, I start to work back into it, and it's like, oh, okay, we're good. But there is that temptation right after Christmas is over, specifically after New Year's over, right?
Yeah.
It's then you start to feel like, okay, so what's the next big thing, you know? But with the mundane, it's kind of like, what do we think of when we think of that word mundane? And I looked up the definition of it, and it actually said, of this earthly world rather than a heavenly or spiritual one. And I thought that was super interesting because I think a lot of the times in our life, when we're doing our day-to-day, we're going to work, or, we're with our family and we're grocery shopping and everything, we see it on such a earthly level, because all of that stuff is very you do it day after day after day, and it starts to feel like there's maybe not a huge purpose to it. But a verse in the Bible, it says in Psalms 18, 24, that this is a day that the Lord has made. And so every single day, God has actually created that day for a purpose. And it might not seem like a big purpose at the time, but he is in our everyday, and he owns our day, and he has plans for us, and he has plans for us to grow, And so actually no day is technically mundane because it always involves a heavenly purpose of God.
Absolutely. I know that's not always the first thing I think when I wake up in the morning.
Yeah, for sure.
This is the day the Lord has made.
And I've actually started to think of that verse. I've tried, because I don't think about it, but whenever I'm feeling a little bit discouraged, or feeling like, oh, this is just going doing the same thing over and over, I think about that, and it really does give me a little bit of pep in my step. And then there's other days that I don't feel like that.
It's true. It's true. And it's you're not always going to feel it. And we're not even going to sit here and tell you that there's a way to make it to where all the mundane things you have to do suddenly always feel exciting.
No.
But I think just shifting our perspective on maybe the importance of it, and what it really means. Because like you said, the mundane is really just these earthly things. And this is what the Lord has given us to steward. And being a steward is a responsibility and a privilege. And so a scripture that I was thinking of is in Ephesians 4:1-3. It says, "So I, the prisoner for the Lord, appeal to you to live a life worthy of the calling to which you have been called. That is, to live a life that exhibits godly character, moral courage, personal integrity, and mature behavior. A life that expresses gratitude to God for your salvation, with all humility, forsaking self-righteousness and gentleness, maintaining self-control, with patience, bearing one another in unselfish love." And I love how it says all of these things that we're supposed to have, right? Godly character, moral courage, personal integrity, mature behavior, and then a dash, and then what is this? A life that expresses gratitude to God for your salvation. Yeah. And when I read that, it really made me think, you know what? That's really what this is. When you're taking care of your home, when you're buying groceries, when you're taking care of a project at work, when you're listening to a friend who needs to be heard, all of these things that we steward that seem so insignificant in the moment, they're in a lot of ways, they're serving other people, they're doing other things, right? They're serving your work, they're serving your friends, they're serving your family. but it's also expressing your gratitude to God for his salvation in your life. And I think at the end of the day, if we just shifted our perspective that way, of all of these things that we're doing to steward the mundane is actually worship and gratitude back to God,
Yeah.
it really changes all of the unseen things that we do, because the one who sees us is the one that we're worshiping with these things that we're doing.
Yeah, like, and just honestly, a lot of times it is easy to focus on those things that you're doing, like work, and like if you have kids, taking care of them and getting them to their practices in school. But sometimes I'll just be living my day to day, and I'll just kind of think about and be reminded of like how cool the world is with like Jesus and his salvation, like you just mentioned, like just remembering what this world actually is. It's like a God that created it, and like we're his children, and we're part of like a heavenly kingdom. Like kind of I've seen tattoos about like I don't know what it looked like, but it's something about like having a heavenly perspective or something, or keeping your eyes on, I don't know. But anyway.
So you're like doing this. It's like, I think that's sign language for something. So I'm like, what are you saying?
And the podcast people like don't even know what I'm doing. I hand signals.
She's making motions by her temple. So,
but just like having a heavenly view sometimes. And there's a verse about that, like kind of just keeping your eyes on the spiritual sometimes. And that's not always practical. Like, of course, you're having to live your day to day, but just being reminded of like, wow, what's actually happening behind the scenes is like this amazing thing. Like, we talk about Narnia a lot. It's like you read Narnia and you watch it. It's like, that's actually kind of what's happening on the day to day,
Absolutely. Those books will shift your perspective.
That is true. But when you were talking, I also thought about, so if the mundane sounds like, when we're living day to day in and day out, doing the same things, then what does the non-mundane look like? Like, how do I perceive it? And it's kind of like, oh, it's when we're going on vacations, and it's when we're getting a new job, and like stuff is going well for us generally. Like we don't think of the non-mundane as like stuff going wrong, but like when stuff is going well. But in the mundane, in that day to day, I feel like that's actually when we grow the most, like there's seasons of growth, and there's seasons of learning, and then there's seasons of the fruit. And I feel like in the mundane seasons is when we are learning a lot. And I think that's because in those days, that's when we are dealing with people the most. It's like we're dealing with our family, we're, working with coworkers, and it's like, like choosing to walk in the spirit, and like choosing love, and choosing to, that verse, iron sharpens iron. And it's like when you're living with these people day in and day out, those are giving you those skills that will grow you for those non-mundane, air quotes, those non-mundane seasons where you're like, something is accomplished and you're moving somewhere and stuff like that.
And life doesn't really happen in those like high moments. It's like you might have a few really great memories from a vacation, or a really great night celebrating a promotion at work. But our life, when we're actually filming this episode, it's actually New Year's Eve. So sorry to pop the bubble, but
the illusion.
We changed our outfit, but it's actually New Year's Eve. And it's just thinking back. I was just doing this, I think yesterday, just getting ready for, having friends over and celebrating the new year. And I was just thinking, sorry, my hat fits really weird. I don't know.
It looks good.
It's like not balanced on my head. I was thinking back on this year, and just all of the things that Jeff and I went through and got memories on. And there were some really cool, amazing things that were, just flat out awesome. But most of the fun memories, I actually printed out a bunch of photos from this year and put them all over our home, because I never do that. And every photo I look at, I realize that was actually not like just an easy moment. It wasn't just like the high point of the year. It was actually in the midst of work, or in the midst of a difficult situation, or, but we, like you said, we had friends, we got together, we had conversations, we accomplished stuff. Like life is really
happening right now
in all of those in-between moments outside of Felicia's air quotes, right? Like that's where life is happening.
Yeah.
And if we wait to enjoy our lives when you go on vacation, I used to try to surprise Jeff for his birthday. I did that last year. we're done with that. We're done. I don't think enjoys surprises as much as I do.
Oh God, I love surprises. But Brian's the same way though.
Really?
So it's like I'm learning that as well.
Maybe, yeah. But I like surprises, but something that I learned about Jeff too is that he really likes the anticipation of something. And I get that because I'm very much the same way. I will look forward to a Disney trip for 3 months, Me too. Then I go on the trip and it's amazing and I have a good time, but I also really enjoyed the 3 months going. There was a really loud noise outside. Sound. I don't know if you could hear it.
I thought
Alicia just thought it was the funniest thing.
I thought UFO was like landing on it sounded really loud anyway.
We live near an airport, okay? But
that's what it was.
That might be it. But he really likes the anticipation of things. And so this year I told him my idea and now he's really excited and he's helping to plan it and stuff. And so if we just wait to enjoy our lives in those high moments, like we're never going to really have a lot of joy in our life. We have to enjoy the everyday, and the things we do might not always be super fun, but we can find joy in those things. And I think that's really where life is lived. And I know for me, the thing that I probably struggle the most with this is complaining. And I don't know why, but I think I don't complain to other people a lot, but I complain to Jeff. I complain to maybe my closest friends. And it's just like there's something in us that just when we start complaining, we just want to complain more. And I don't think I complain too much, but I don't know. I complain quite a bit, but I notice that when I start complaining, I don't get more joyful. Right? Sometimes I'll actually start out by just talking about something that's frustrating and I'm not upset. I'm just kind of explaining what's going on and I keep talking and keep talking and keep talking. And now I'm angry. Now I'm like, how dare they? And I'm just like in this situation and all of a sudden my emotions get involved in it. And I'm like, what did I just do to myself?
Yeah.
And I find it interesting that in the, I almost said Garden of Eden, when the children of Israel left Egypt, very different situation. When the children of Israel left Egypt, I haven't verified this myself, but I've heard several ministers say this, that the trip that the children of Israel were meant to take from Egypt to the Promised Land was about an 11-day journey. And they took it in 40 years. And when you think of it that way, I mean, maybe it wasn't 11 days, but that's still a pretty big gap.
That is.
And you think like, what happened? And I think there's probably several reasons for that. I think they were trained, they were all this stuff. But one of the things that it says is they complained. And I've heard it said before, when you complain, you remain. And I think when we complain about our situations and our mundane tasks and the things we have to do and our responsibilities and we complain, it means we're going to remain. All right, God's not punishing us. He has good things for us. But if we're not going to learn these lessons and we're not going to own up to our responsibilities and we're not going to learn how to find joy in the midst of these things, like, all right, we're going to need to go around the mountain again. You got to learn this lesson because what's coming next isn't going to be any easier, but you can find more joy, but you got to learn it now. You can't wait till you have a bigger home to learn how to clean your home, right? Yeah. I had to learn that lesson, and you can't wait until you have the job of the career of your dreams before you work hard and respect your bosses at the job you have. It just doesn't work that way. Yeah. And so it's just important for us to learn it now in these moments because it opens up the doors for us in the future.
Yeah, and I have found, because I noticed, I feel like maybe I've always complained a bit, but I've noticed it more in myself like the last couple years.
I think we've all found more complaining in the last few years with an international pandemic.
Yeah, that could be it. And I notice it's like, and this is obvious, but it's like I look back and I'm like, it never makes a situation any better. And I'm like talking to myself right now, but it's like it never makes it better. And whenever I'm going through something like that, like what if I had not complained? What if I had like looked for something good in it? It would have made it so much more enjoyable. And so it's kind of like we kick ourselves when we do that. But you had said something earlier about like making the day-to-day, like stewarding it and making it, not waiting for those big trips to enjoy your life.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about that as well, because like I think sometimes I fall into living for the weekend kind of mentality.
I'm living for the week.
Yeah.
Michael Scott.
But when I've noticed that I do that sometimes, it's like like, we're like, oh, do you want to make this fun recipe? It's like, yeah, let's make it on Friday. Do you want to go see this? Like, you want to go out to this new restaurant? Let's do it on Saturday. And it's like putting like,
it's like your fun days.
It's like our fun days and our non-fun days.
Your
right?
non-fun days. Yeah.
But the problem with that is that we have 5 days versus
That's so
2.
true.
Like, I love taking baths and like bubble baths. I love it. But I'm always like, oh, like I'll do it on Friday. And so I have Friday and Saturday that I'm doing all these like 100
Wednesdays
fun things.
are my bubble bath days.
And I've appreciated
because
that.
it's halfway through the week. It's actually a little over halfway. And then you're like, oh, this is nice.
Yeah. So that's just like a little tip I've started to try to incorporate in my life. Don't wait until the weekend to just do all these things that you're wanting to do. Yeah. Because I found like I look forward so much to Friday and then I'm like dreading. And it's like, oh, why? Maybe it's because I only allow myself to have fun, like a little bit fun in the weekend.
Imagine that.
Yeah, exactly. So there you go. My little tip.
There you go. That was free. So what are some of the areas that we're meant to steward in our lives? I think we're all aware of these things, but I think just kind of talking about them sometimes helps us realize that we're not alone in these struggles and we're not alone in these mundane things that we all have to do. Mm-hmm. But one of the first ones that comes to mind, and probably the one that comes to mind the most, is our homes and families. And I think that's one that I think hits us a lot, and it's the most obvious when we think about this, taking care of your home, cleaning, cooking meals, taking care of your family, making sure they're good, taking care of the finances, like all the stuff that goes into homemaking, I think can also really suck up a lot of your time. And it feels, to me, it's the stuff that feels the most repetitive and mundane in that sense of just like, I did the dishes. How is the sink full again? Just like, kind of like that's the stuff that tends to get under my skin. I don't know about you.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That out of everything for sure. It feels like the most mundane as well. And I saw, this is kind of the same, like we don't have kids, but I did see a post one time and it was like a satirical post, but it was saying that the mom said that she got nothing accomplished today while she was raising precious souls. And it's like, that's literally, so many moms, and I totally understand, like it's, there's so much being a mom and there's so much that it feels very mundane. But it's crazy because you think about like parents, what they're doing every day, and they're raising these human beings that could grow up to do great things. But we just are thinking about it like with cleaning the house. It's like, it just feels so mundane. But I don't know. I just thought of Karate Kid, it's like you're learning lessons like wax on, wax off, or something a little bigger, right?
It's so true. And if you want more in your life, if you'd like to have a bigger home, if you'd like to have more people over, if you'd like to, do all these things, it's like, well, what are you doing with the things you have? And I think a lot of it, if we shifted our perspective, we would realize that when we do these things, we're sowing into our futures.
Yeah.
Other people might not see. Most people aren't going to see 98% of the things that you do, but those are seeds that are being planted in your future. The same with your kids. Everything you sow in your kids is being planted into their futures as well.
Yeah.
And just shifting our perspective on these tasks. I mean, just being grateful that I can clean my home and being grateful that I can cook meals and, just finding ways to enjoy it too. I have been known to have a glass of kombucha while I go around cooking dinner and I listen to my podcast, not this podcast, but I listen to other podcasts while I cook. And I think you can find little ways. I think it's actually important to find little ways to enjoy those things, because that way you actually, you might not always look forward to it, but the enemy wants you to be so discouraged by it that you don't, like, you almost see it as a bad thing.
Yeah.
Like, oh, you have to do the dishes again? You have to clean this house again? These people are so messy, right? Like, no one appreciates what you do. They just ruin it as soon as you do it. It's like, that's what the enemy wants to get you to do. But what we can do is come in and go, no, I am so grateful that I am able to serve this way. I am so grateful that I can serve my family, that I can raise these children, that I can be a help to my husband as he's working. Like, I can do these, whatever your situation is, that you can actually serve in this way. And that it's a godly thing that is actually quite overlooked in our culture today.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I mentioned this on the last episode, that a lot of the things that are of the world, it's like the opposite for God. And I feel like a lot of the stuff that we view as the mundane is actually the biggest stuff in God's eyes. Like us growing in those moments, us raising kids, or us, learning how to be a better wife or a better husband or a better employee, like working for the Lord instead of man. Like all these things that we're learning in those day-to-day moments are the most important things to God. And speaking of work, that's another area.
Yes.
For me, absolutely. And we both work for Andrew Womack at a ministry. And one thing I love is that he mentions a lot about like remembering the higher purpose to what you do. Because so I'm an admin assistant, and a lot of the stuff I do is just like I'm at my desk, it can be mundane to a certain extent. And it's a lot of like, paperwork and whatever and like stuff like that. And then I think about, well, I am at a ministry and, the stuff that I'm doing is necessary for the other person to do what they need to do. And eventually you realize if all of us weren't working together to do the stuff that seems mundane and the stuff that seems less mundane, these people's lives wouldn't be getting changed, And it's not like it's like trying to say it in a way of, I'm forgetting the word, the opposite of humility.
Pride.
Yeah, pride. It's not like pride. It's like, oh, well, I'm doing this. But just seeing that what you do actually has a higher purpose.
Yes, absolutely. And that's what like we said, the enemy doesn't want you to think about is that bigger purpose, the spiritual concept behind what you're doing. But I remember back in the day, I've had many jobs, as I know you have. Like I've had many different jobs. I'm so grateful for the job I have now. And I would say it is more of a career type job. It's what I love. But this has not always been what I did. I coached gymnastics. I worked for a catering company. I worked, I remember sitting at, 12 a.m. to 1 a.m. and folding the panty drawer at Victoria's Secret, which is not fun, by the way.
No, because that gets messy. I was just there the other day.
It is the worst ever. Okay. Yeah. And then, one of my worst jobs, this place was a great place. It had nothing to do with the place, but my personality is not like this. I'm very introverted. And I worked at a shoe store that basically what I had to do is for every customer that walked in that asked to try on a pair of shoes, I had to go in the back and I had to get them the shoe they wanted in that size, the shoe they wanted in a half size above or below, just in case, a similar shoe to the one that they picked out, and then my personal favorite.
I hope you had a basket because
I had
a
to
lot
bring
of shoes.
4 shoes. Imagine when someone wanted to try on 3, I don't think it quite worked that way. But how horrible. It's like this person does not want 4 shoes. They asked for 1 shoe. And it was so hard for me and I did so bad. And I didn't work there very long and then I started working at a restaurant. But it was like I tried my best and I just kept finding things. And I think what's really important when it comes to your job is you can't wait until you have a job worth having, that you respect the bosses and you do all this before you start respecting the job and putting your best foot forward and respecting your bosses, because that lesson is being learned now, wherever you're at. You're learning that lesson now, or you're not learning that lesson now. And that's why we keep going around the same mountain, right?
Yeah.
Why isn't it working out? Why isn't it working out? What lessons are we not learning? And I think that's something that's really important to realize when it comes to our jobs. And even now, even though I have a job that I love and it's not just a job, I still have to remind myself, like when things get difficult or I'm in a frustrating situation, how am I handling myself? Because that's going to determine, what happens in my future as well. How am I being a good coworker? How am I being a good employee? And all of those things.
Yeah, I'm thinking back and I'm trying to remember. I feel like every single job I've had has been laying some sort of base for the next one. And I didn't even realize it. And I didn't know why, why am I needing these skills?
Yeah.
But it's because you're going to need them for the next level. And if you don't develop that now, you're not going to be ready, And it's actually just really cool because then you're seeing how God is patient, but he's also working behind the scenes and he has so much grace on us because he's like, okay, I'm going to try to teach this again and again. And my hand is in this, because I look back and I'm like, oh yeah, I would have needed that to do what I'm doing now.
Yes, absolutely. I needed to know how to fold those panties.
Like we said, what was it? Karate Kid.
Karate, wax on, wax off. Absolutely. Same thing.
I wish I had worn one of those things around my head with the tie.
Oh, I know what you mean. I don't know what it's called. But another area that I don't think is really fun to talk about, but super important, that we're meant to steward is our health and our bodies. And I was thinking about this. I was actually just out to dinner with a friend who's pregnant, and we were just kind of talking about the things with being pregnant, what to eat, what not to eat, right? How to take care of yourself. And it's really interesting that when a woman's pregnant, right, we think so much about like, I got to take care of the baby. I got to take care of the baby, right? Like, normally this is like how it goes. It's like you're so concerned with even the things you eat, the things you put on your skin, like the things you listen to, because you want to protect that baby and you want to make sure it's healthy. And yet when we're not pregnant, it's like we don't always take that same concern. And yeah, maybe we don't need to take the same kinds of concerns, but really we're meant to steward our bodies and our health, right? Like just like God told us. I mean, we're not going to have these bodies in heaven, but there are vehicles for being here on the earth. And I just think it's one of those things that we overlook. It's not about, dieting and having the flattest stomach and having the most shred abs, but it's also not about just not caring about ourselves and letting ourselves fall apart. But another area we steward ourselves is in our health and just making sure that we're healthy and strong so we can do what God's called us to do.
Yeah. And I think that's why it's so good that we use the word stewarding, because with our bodies too, like God said that these are his, like our bodies are actually his temple, like they're no longer ours but his. And so when we view it in that light, it's like this is a temple of God. And that makes it so awesome. But I love that you said too, like with the working out, if our view and our goal is just to look better, I feel like that's never been a motivation for me. Well, it's never gonna like that, honestly.
I was gonna say
different.
Well, it's never going to be enough either.
It's never going to be enough. It'll never be enough. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
And I feel like when I think about it like that, this could just be like a personality flaw, but I feel like that's never motivated me to stick with it. Like it'll motivate me in the beginning, but it'll never motivated me to stick with it,
Okay, another area that I think is important to talk about with stewarding the mundane in our lives is our relationships. And yes, obviously our marriage, right? That's a really important one. But I think sometimes we, as Christians, we know that, we get that, we think about that, but then we don't always think about the other relationships in our lives, right? There's our friends, there's the people that we share things with and they share with us. But then there's also the people that God just has kind of called us to love and to listen to. And it's like, how are we handling that? We don't always choose the people that God puts in our life. We always joke that, we have those sandpaper people, right? But if God brought that person in your life, they're there for a reason. And it may not be the reason you think. It could just be to listen and to love them. But if you're wanting influence and you're wanting to reach more people, the first thing we need to do is look at the people God's already brought us. Because if we mishandle the people that are in our lives now, God's not about to bring us more of his kids so we can hurt them, right? He loves them too much, and he loves us too much if it's going to destroy our hearts in the process.
Yeah. And there are relationships, we've talked about this on a previous episode, like there are relationships that God might be trying to pull us out of, but I feel like too often, at least in our culture, it seems like too often we go towards that right away when something bad happens. It's like, okay, well, like, this person's not helping me grow anymore. And then it's just like you cut them off kind of thing. But I just mentioned this verse recently, but it's like that iron sharpens iron. If we're cutting out the people in our life that that we rub it the wrong way, those sandpaper people, then we really don't have anything left that's going to help us learn or grow or anything like that.
That's so true. The worst situation you could find yourself in is being surrounded by people who don't tell you the truth.
Yeah.
That is I think I think we should be scared of ending up in that situation, because a lot of people are. I'm sure like a lot of celebrities end up in that situation, and it's very sad, because how do you know? How do you know? Like, I know I'm very confused in a lot of ways, right? Like, I know I need help. I know I don't see everything correctly. And it makes me so happy to know that I have friends who love me enough to tell me when I'm being weird right now. No, but it's good to have friends like that. And to steward that well, also, like you said, doesn't mean to just hang on when you should be letting go. Being a good steward is knowing when to hold on and when to let go, when to listen and when to walk away. And so I think just kind of approaching our relationships more with that mentality of just like, how am I stewarding the people in my life?
Yeah.
And the different levels of friendship, because you're not going to be best friends with everybody, but that doesn't mean you can't love and listen to people.
Yeah, a lesson I've had to learn as I've gotten older is I was even more introverted when I was younger, like more shy, and I would really only want to reach out to people if they reached out to me first, because I was like, okay, I know they want to see me if they reach out to me, but if I reach out to them, maybe they're tired of me at that point. And so it's like, that's a terrible way to try to make friends, because then that person, you're not thinking about the other person who's like, if I'm only reaching out to them, they obviously don't want to see me. It's like, so I've had to learn to, store those relationships. If I want people in my life, I have to put effort into it too, and I have to take those risks with people and realize maybe it's not all just about me feeling like I'm liked. Like maybe they need me reaching out to them. Like maybe they need me putting a hand out to them too.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, I think really at the end of the day, it just really is nice to take a look at the things that are in our life and just shift our perspective, because they're not going to change. I mean, we're not going to have to not do the dishes, right? We're not going to have to not, talk to our friends or go to work and stuff. And so we might as well see that as the moments that make up our life. And so we need to find ways to have joy with them, and we need to find ways to grow in those moments, because I don't want to keep circling the mountain every single time in these areas of my life. And so this year, I think it'd be good just for us to kind of maybe shift our perspective a bit on these different areas of our life and see them as not just an opportunity to grow and to become a better person, but also, to worship God and show him how thankful we are that we get to have these things in our life, because there's so many people who don't always have what you have.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like a life is a lot just about perspective, and gratefulness is like a huge shift for perspective, and it honestly makes life a lot more enjoyable.
Makes it a lot more enjoyable.
Yeah.
So I hope that you enjoyed this episode. And if you did, then please like it and subscribe to the podcast, because we've got some fun series coming up for you guys really soon, and we're really excited about it. You won't want to miss them.
Yes, and also, if you didn't know, you can check us out on Instagram and Facebook, and make sure to come back for next week's episode.